The autumn leaves crunched beneath Eleanor's worn leather shoes as she stood outside the gated estate, clutching the letter that had shattered her world. At 70, she had seen her share of heartaches, but nothing stung like the words scrawled in her son Michael's fiancée's elegant handwriting. "You are not welcome at our wedding." The paper trembled in her hands, not from age, but from the fury and hurt coursing through her. Evelyn, the bride-to-be, had made it clear Eleanor's modest life, her small apartment, and her outdated ways didn't fit the vision of their lavish celebration. Michael, her only son, hadn't called to explain. He hadn't called at all. Eleanor had raised Michael alone after his father left them when he was just a boy. She worked double shifts at the diner, mended his clothes by hand, and taught him to dream beyond their cramped Chicago apartment. She remembered the nights he'd fall asleep on her lap, promising to buy her a big house one day. Now, at 32, Michael was a successful architect, his name on glossy magazines, his life a world away from hers. And Evelyn, with her designer dresses and sharp smile, had swept him into a life Eleanor barely recognized. She folded the letter and tucked it into her coat pocket, her breath visible in the crisp air. The estate loomed ahead, its marble columns and manicured gardens screaming wealth. Eleanor's heart ached not for the grandeur, but for the boy who once clung to her. She had always known Evelyn was ambitious, her eyes gleaming with hunger for status. But Eleanor had hoped love, not greed, drove her son's choice. The letter proved otherwise. Evelyn didn't just want Michael's success. She wanted to erase the past that shaped him. As she turned to leave, a memory flickered Michael's laughter as a child, his small hand in hers. She stopped, her jaw tightening. No, she thought. I won't let her erase me. Eleanor had spent her life fighting for her son, and she wasn't about to stop now. But how could she fight someone like Evelyn, who wielded charm and money like weapons? The answer came unexpectedly, in a chance encounter that would change everything. 2 weeks earlier, Eleanor had been at the community center, volunteering at the senior book club. A man, perhaps in his late 40s, had wandered in, his suit slightly wrinkled but his eyes sharp with purpose. He introduced himself as Daniel, a private investigator looking for someone. They struck up a conversation, and when Eleanor mentioned Michael's upcoming wedding, Daniel's face changed. "Evelyn Harper?" he asked, his voice low. "Blonde, about 28, engaged to an architect." Eleanor nodded, her stomach twisting. Daniel leaned closer. "She's not who she says she is." He revealed a truth that made Eleanor's blood run cold. Evelyn was already married. Her husband, a wealthy but reclusive businessman named Victor, believed she was on an extended work trip in Europe. Evelyn had crafted a double life, using her charm to ensnare Michael while keeping Victor in the dark. Daniel had been hired by Victor's family to track her down. The revelation hit Eleanor like a tidal wave. Evelyn wasn't just a gold digger. She was a liar, playing with her son's heart and future. Eleanor spent sleepless nights wrestling with what to do. Confronting Michael directly risked pushing him further away. Evelyn had already poisoned him against her. Convincing him his mother was embarrassing. Going to the police felt futile. Bigamy was a crime. But the wedding was days away, and legal processes were slow. Then, an idea sparked, bold and reckless. If Evelyn wanted to ban her from the wedding, Eleanor would attend anyway with Victor by her side. She contacted Daniel, who arranged a meeting with Victor. The man was nothing like she'd expected. In his early 50s, Victor was quiet, his face lined with the weariness of betrayal. He showed her photos of his life with Evelyn, vacations, dinners, moments that mirrored the ones she now shared with Michael. "I thought she loved me," he said, his voice breaking. Eleanor recognized that pain. It was the same ache she felt losing her son. They formed an unlikely alliance, bound by their shared betrayal and a determination to expose Evelyn's lies. The plan was simple but daring. Victor would accompany Eleanor to the wedding, posing as her guest. At the right moment, they would reveal the truth not with anger, but with the quiet power of undeniable evidence. Eleanor knew the risk. Michael might hate her for it. But she also knew that letting him marry Evelyn would trap him in a lie. She couldn't save him from heartbreak, but she could save him from a future built on deception. The day of the wedding arrived, crisp and golden, the kind of day that promised new beginnings. Eleanor stood in her modest apartment, staring at herself in the mirror. Her gray hair was neatly pinned, her simple navy dress pressed with care. She didn't look like the glamorous guests who would fill the venue, but she carried something they didn't, the fierce love of a mother. Victor arrived, his suit impeccable, his expression a mix of nerves and resolve. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. Eleanor nodded. "For my son." They drove to the estate in silence, the weight of their mission pressing down. The gates loomed again, but this time, Eleanor didn't hesitate. She handed the invitation forged with Daniel's help to the security guard, who barely glanced at it. They stepped into the venue, a sea of flowers and champagne, where guests in designer clothes laughed under chandeliers. Eleanor's heart pounded, but she kept her head high. Somewhere in this crowd was her son, and the woman who thought she could erase her. The grand hall glittered with opulence, chandeliers casting a warm glow over tables draped in silk. Eleanor felt like an outsider, her simple dress stark against the sea of couture. Victor stayed close, his presence steadying her nerves. She scanned the room for Michael, her heart aching at the thought of seeing him after months of silence. The crowd buzzed with excitement, unaware of the storm about to break. Evelyn stood near the altar, radiant in a white gown that must have cost more than Eleanor's yearly rent. Her smile was perfect, practiced, but Eleanor caught the flicker of calculation in her eyes. Michael was beside her, handsome in his tailored tuxedo, his face glowing with pride. Eleanor's chest tightened. He looked happy, but it was a happiness built on lies. She clutched the small envelope in her purse, Victor's marriage certificate, the proof that would unravel Evelyn's charade. Victor whispered, "We need to time this right. After the ceremony starts, but before the vows." Eleanor nodded, her throat dry. She wanted to run to Michael, to shake him awake, but she knew he wouldn't listen, not yet. Evelyn had woven her spell too tightly. Instead, Eleanor and Victor blended into the crowd, taking seats near the back. The music swelled, signaling the start of the ceremony. As the officiant began, Eleanor's mind raced back to the years she'd spent raising Michael. She remembered the sleepless nights when he was sick, the way she'd read him stories until her voice gave out. She'd sacrificed everything to give him a chance at a better life. And now that life was slipping away, stolen by a woman who saw him as a prize. Her hands trembled, but Victor's steady gaze anchored her. They had one chance to make this right. The officiant's voice droned on, and Eleanor's eyes locked on Evelyn. The bride's composure was flawless, but Eleanor noticed her glance toward the crowd, as if sensing a threat. Did she know Victor was here? Had she suspected Eleanor wouldn't stay away? The thought gave Eleanor a spark of strength. She wasn't just a mother fighting for her son. She was a woman who had survived too much to be silenced. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, Eleanor's heart stopped. This was the moment. She stood, her legs shaking but her voice steady. "I do," she said, loud enough for the room to fall silent. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Michael's face turned pale, his eyes wide with shock. Evelyn's smile froze, her hands tightening on her bouquet. Mother. Michael's voice cracked, a mix of confusion and anger. What are you doing here? Evelyn stepped forward, her voice sharp. You weren't invited. Eleanor. Leave. Now. But Eleanor didn't move. She looked at her son, her heart breaking at the distance in his eyes. Michael, I'm here because I love you. And because you deserve the truth. Victor stood beside her, his presence commanding attention. He held up the marriage certificate, his voice calm but firm. Evelyn Harper is already married. To me. The room erupted in whispers, guests turning to one another in disbelief. Evelyn's face drained of color, her eyes darting between Victor and Eleanor. This is absurd, she stammered. He's lying. But Victor was prepared. He handed the certificate to a nearby usher, who passed it to the officiant. The document was undeniably dated, signed, and sealed. Eleanor watched Michael's face as the truth sank in. His shoulders slumped, the joy in his eyes replaced by devastation. Evelyn, he whispered, searching her face for an explanation. Evelyn's composure cracked. Michael, I can explain, she began, but her voice faltered. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, and Eleanor felt a pang of guilt. She hadn't wanted to humiliate her son, but she couldn't let him marry a lie. She stepped closer to him, her voice soft. I'm sorry, Michael. I couldn't let her hurt you more than she already has. Michael's eyes met hers, and for a moment, she saw the boy he used to be vulnerable, trusting. But then his face hardened. You should have told me privately, he said, his voice low. You've ruined everything. He turned and walked out of the hall, leaving Evelyn standing alone, the certificate now in the officiant's hands. Eleanor's heart sank. She had expected his anger, but it still cut deep. Victor touched her arm. Give him time, he said. He's hurting, but he'll see you did this for him. Eleanor nodded, but doubt gnawed at her. Had she saved her son, or had she lost him forever? As the guests dispersed, whispering and staring, Evelyn fled to a side room, her gown trailing behind her. Eleanor wanted to follow Michael, to explain, but Victor stopped her. Let him process this. He needs space. Reluctantly, she agreed, but her heart screamed to hold her son, to tell him she'd never meant to hurt him. They left the venue, the autumn air colder now, biting at Eleanor's skin. She felt the weight of the day pressing down, the victory bittersweet. She had exposed Evelyn, but at what cost? The drive back to her apartment was silent, Victor respecting her need for quiet. When they parted, he promised to keep in touch, to help her navigate whatever came next. Eleanor thanked him, but her thoughts were with Michael. That night, alone in her small apartment, Eleanor sat by the window, staring at the city lights. She thought of the letter, now crumpled in her purse, and the years she'd spent fighting for her son. She had always believed love was enough to hold them together, but now she wasn't sure. All she could do was wait and hope Michael would come back to her. The days after the wedding were a blur of silence and regret. Eleanor's phone stayed quiet. No calls or messages from Michael. She checked it obsessively, hoping for a sign that he was ready to talk. But the screen remained blank. Her small apartment felt emptier than ever, the walls echoing with memories of Michael's childhood laughter. She busied herself with routine watering her plants, volunteering at the community center, but the ache in her chest never eased. Victor called once, checking in. He told her Evelyn had disappeared from the city, likely fleeing the scandal. The marriage certificate had been enough to unravel her carefully constructed lies. and rumors swirled that she was hiding out somewhere on the West Coast. Victor sounded tired but relieved, ready to move on with his life. "You did the right thing," he told Eleanor. "Even if it doesn't feel like it now." She wanted to believe him, but Michael's absence made every moment heavy with doubt. One gray morning, Eleanor found herself at the diner where she'd worked for decades. It was a place of comfort, its faded booths and coffee-stained counters unchanged by time. She sat in her old spot by the window, sipping tea, when a familiar figure walked in. Daniel, the private investigator. His suit was less wrinkled this time, his smile warm. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Eleanor gestured to the seat across from her. Daniel had been following the fallout from the wedding. He confirmed Evelyn's departure but added a new piece of information. Michael had taken a leave of absence from his firm. "He's not answering calls, but he's still in the city," Daniel said. "I think he's just lost." Eleanor's heart clenched. She pictured her son alone, grappling with betrayal, and hated that she couldn't reach him. "Should I go to him?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel leaned back, thoughtful. "He's angry, Eleanor, but not just at you. He's angry at himself for not seeing the truth. Give him a little more time, but don't give up." His words echoed Victor's, but they didn't ease the pain. Eleanor thanked him and paid for her tea, her mind racing with what-ifs. Back home, she pulled out a box of old photos, a ritual she turned to when the world felt too heavy. There was Michael at 5, grinning with a missing tooth. At 16, awkward in his prom suit. At 25, proud at his college graduation. Each image was a reminder of the bond they'd shared, a bond she refused to believe was broken. She wrote him a letter, not the first she'd written since the wedding, but the first she felt ready to send. In it, she poured out her heart, telling him she loved him, that she'd only wanted to protect him, that she'd wait as long as it took for him to come back. She mailed the letter the next day, her hands trembling as she dropped it into the mailbox. It felt like a lifeline, fragile but real. Days passed with no response, and Eleanor threw herself into her volunteer work, hoping to drown the silence. At the community center, she helped organize a book drive, her hands sorting through donated novels while her mind wandered to Michael. She wondered if he'd read her letter, if he'd felt her love through the words. One evening, as she locked up the center, her phone buzzed. Her heart leapt, but it was only a text from Victor, asking how she was holding up. She typed a brief reply, masking her disappointment, and headed home. The city was alive with lights, but Eleanor felt like a shadow moving through it. She stopped at a park bench, the same one where she and Michael used to eat ice cream on summer evenings. The memory was so vivid she could almost hear his laughter. Then, a voice broke through her thoughts. "Mom." She turned, her breath catching. Michael stood there, his coat rumpled, his face drawn with exhaustion. For a moment, neither spoke. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but she held them back, waiting. "I got your letter," he said finally, his voice thick. I didn't know what to say." Eleanor stood, her heart pounding. "You don't have to say anything, Michael. Just tell me you're okay." He looked away, his jaw tight. "I'm not okay. I was so blind. Mom. I thought she loved me." The pain in his voice was raw, and Eleanor stepped closer, wanting to hold him but afraid he'd pull away. "You couldn't have known," she said softly. "She fooled us all." Michael shook his head. "I should have listened to you. You tried to warn me about her, and I pushed you away." His eyes met hers, glistening with unshed tears. "I'm sorry, Mom. I was so caught up in her world. I forgot ours." Eleanor's throat tightened. And this time, she didn't hold back. She wrapped her arms around him. And to her relief, he hugged her back, his embrace tight, like the boy who once clung to her. They sat on the bench, talking for hours. Michael told her about the weeks since the wedding, his anger, his shame, his struggle to rebuild. Eleanor listened, her heart swelling with hope. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a start. As the park grew dark, Michael took her hand. "Can I come home?" he asked, his voice small. Eleanor smiled, tears streaming down her face. "You never left." Michael's return to Eleanor's life was tentative, like the first steps of a child learning to walk. They spent evenings together in her apartment, cooking simple meals, the kind they used to share when he was young. Spaghetti with store-bought sauce, a far cry from the gourmet dishes Evelyn had insisted on. Michael didn't talk much about her, but Eleanor could see the weight of betrayal in his quiet moments, the way his eyes lingered on nothing. She didn't push him. Instead, she filled the silence with stories about her childhood, about the diner, about the time she'd saved for months to buy him his first sketchbook. Michael listened, sometimes smiling, sometimes lost in thought. Eleanor cherished these moments, knowing they were rebuilding something fragile but precious. Still, she worried. The hurt in Michael's eyes was deep, and she feared it might linger forever. One night, as they washed dishes side by side, Michael spoke up. "I keep thinking about how I let her control me," he said, his hands pausing in the soapy water. "She made me feel like I wasn't enough unless I fit her world. And I let her make me ashamed of you." His voice broke, and Eleanor set down her dish towel, turning to face him. "You were in love," she said gently. "Love can blind us. It doesn't mean you're weak." Michael shook his head, his jaw tight. "I should have been stronger. I should have seen her for what she was." Eleanor reached for his hand, her touch steady. "You're seeing now? That's what matters." Their conversations grew deeper over the weeks, peeling back layers of pain. Michael admitted he'd been dazzled by Evelyn's confidence, her promises of a life he'd dreamed of as a boy. But he also saw now how she'd manipulated him, isolating him from Eleanor, planting doubts about his own worth. "She wanted me to forget where I came from," he said one evening, his voice heavy. "But I never could." Eleanor listened, her heart aching for the boy who'd once promised her the world. She told him about her own mistakes, trusting his father too long, working too much when Michael was young. "We all carry regrets," she said, "but we don't let them define us. You're still the man who built bridges, who dreamed big. She didn't take that from you." Slowly, Michael began to heal. He returned to his firm, taking on smaller projects, rediscovering the passion that had driven him to architecture. Eleanor watched him with pride, but also with caution. She knew trust, once broken, took time to rebuild. She kept in touch with Victor, who had started divorce proceedings against Evelyn. He sent her a letter, thanking her for giving him the courage to face the truth. "You reminded me what it means to fight for family," he wrote. Eleanor tucked the letter away, a quiet reminder that her actions had rippled beyond her own life. One afternoon, Michael surprised her with a visit to the community center. He carried a box of old books, donations for the book drive. The seniors greeted him warmly, their faces lighting up as he shared stories of his latest projects. Eleanor watched from the sidelines, her heart full. This was her son, not the polished architect Evelyn had tried to mold, but the kind, curious man she'd raised. As they walked home, Michael stopped at the park bench where they'd reconciled. "I want to do something for you, Mom," he said, his voice earnest. "Something to show you I'm sorry." Eleanor shook her head. You being here is enough. But Michael insisted. He told her about a community project he'd been designating a small library for the neighborhood. A place where people like Eleanor could share stories and knowledge. I want to dedicate it to you, he said, for everything you've done for me. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She didn't need a grand gesture. But the thought of her son honoring her in this way felt like a bridge between their past and future. I'd be proud, she said simply. And Michael hugged her, his arms strong and sure. The project became their shared focus. Michael showed her his sketches, asking for her input, and Eleanor felt a spark of joy she hadn't known in years. They spent evenings poring over plans, debating layouts, laughing over small disagreements. It was a new kind of partnership, one built on mutual respect. Eleanor saw glimpses of the boy she'd raised, but also the man he was becoming stronger, wiser, grounded in the values she'd instilled. As winter approached, the library began to take shape. Eleanor visited the site, watching workers lay bricks, her son's vision coming to life. She thought of the wedding, the pain of that day now a distant ache. She had fought for Michael, not with anger, but with love, and it had brought him back to her. The library wasn't just a building. It was a testament to their bond, a promise that they'd never lose each other again. The library project became a beacon of hope for Eleanor and Michael, a shared dream that pulled them closer. Each visit to the construction site filled Eleanor with pride not just for the building, but for the man her son was becoming. Michael threw himself into the work, his sketches evolving into walls and windows, a space that would hold stories for generations. Eleanor saw his passion reignited, and it warmed her heart to know she'd played a part in it. But healing wasn't linear. Some days, Michael's mood darkened, the shadow of Evelyn's betrayal lingering. He'd grow quiet, his hands fidgeting with a pencil as he stared at his designs. Eleanor learned to give him space, trusting he'd talk when ready. One evening, as they sat in her apartment with takeout pizza, he opened up. I keep wondering what I missed, he said. How could I not see her lies? Eleanor set down her slice, her voice gentle. You saw what she wanted you to see. That's not your fault. Michael nodded, but his eyes were distant. I don't trust myself anymore. What if I make the same mistake again? Eleanor reached across the table, her hand resting on his. You won't. Because you're not the same man you were. You've learned, Michael. And you've got me to remind you who you are. He gave her a small smile, the first she'd seen in days, and it felt like a victory. The community began to buzz about the library. Neighbors stopped Eleanor at the grocery store, asking about the project, praising Michael's vision. She beamed with pride but deflected the credit to her son. He's always had big dreams, she'd say, and they'd nod, seeing the love in her eyes. The seniors at the community center started planning events for the library's opening book readings, writing workshops, even a storytelling night for kids. Eleanor felt a sense of purpose, her life intertwined with something bigger than herself. Victor visited one weekend, bringing news that his divorce was finalized. He looked lighter, his smile genuine. I'm selling the house, he told Eleanor over coffee. Starting fresh. Maybe I'll travel, see the world I ignored for too long. Eleanor admired his resilience, but she also saw the parallels to her own journey. They had both been hurt, yet they were rebuilding, piece by piece. You'll find your way, she told him, and he nodded, grateful for her quiet strength. As spring bloomed, the library neared completion. Michael invited Eleanor to see the finished interior, and she walked through the doors, awestruck. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating shelves waiting to be filled. The dedication plaque read, For Eleanor, who taught me to build with love. Tears pricked her eyes, but she laughed them away, hugging Michael tightly. You've outdone yourself, she whispered. He grinned, a spark of his old self shining through. The opening day was a celebration. The neighborhood turned out in droves, children running through the aisles, seniors sharing stories, local authors reading excerpts. Michael gave a speech, his voice steady as he thanked the community and his mother. She showed me what it means to fight for what matters, he said, looking at Eleanor. The crowd applauded, and Eleanor felt a warmth she hadn't known in years. She didn't need the spotlight. Seeing Michael whole again was enough. After the event, they walked to their park bench. A ritual now. The air was soft with spring, the city alive around them. Michael took her hand. I'm going to be okay, Mom, he said, his voice certain. Because of you. Eleanor squeezed his hand, her heart full. We're going to be okay, she corrected, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the world go by. But life, Eleanor knew, was never without surprises. A week later, Daniel called with news. Evelyn had resurfaced, claiming she'd changed, begging Michael to meet her. Eleanor's stomach dropped. She told Michael, bracing for his reaction. To her relief, he shook his head. I'm done with her, he said firmly. She doesn't get to hurt us again. Eleanor felt a weight lift, replaced by a quiet pride. Her son was stronger than she'd dared hope. The library became a hub, a place where stories healed and connected. Eleanor volunteered there, reading to children, her voice bringing characters to life. Michael visited often, sketching new ideas, his passion for creation undimmed. Their bond, once fractured, was now a foundation, built on trust and love. Eleanor knew the scars would always be there, but so would the strength they'd found together. The library stood as a testament to resilience, its shelves filled with stories that mirrored Eleanor and Michael's own. Months after the opening, it was a second home to them, a place where they could be themselves. Eleanor spent her days there, organizing events, her laughter mingling with the chatter of visitors. Michael stopped by after work, his briefcase swapped for a sketchbook, his ideas flowing freely again. One evening, as they closed up the library, Michael turned to Eleanor. I've been thinking about the future, he said, his voice thoughtful. I want to keep building things that matter, things like this. He gestured to the shelves, the warm glow of the reading lamps. Eleanor smiled, her heart swelling. You will, she said. You always have. Their relationship wasn't perfect. There were moments when Michael's doubts resurfaced, or when Eleanor worried she'd pushed him too far at the wedding. But they talked through it, their honesty a bridge over old wounds. Michael began dating again, cautiously, and Eleanor watched with a mother's hope, trusting he'd choose someone who valued him for who he was. Victor sent occasional updates, postcards from his travels: Paris, Tokyo, places he'd never seen before. You gave me a second chance, he wrote in one, and Eleanor smiled, tucking it away with her other keepsakes. She thought of Evelyn sometimes, wondering where she'd ended up, but the anger had faded. Eleanor had her son back, and that was enough. The community embraced the library, and with it, Eleanor and Michael. They hosted a storytelling night, where Eleanor shared her own story, not the details of the wedding, but the lessons of love and forgiveness. The audience listened, rapt, and Michael sat in the front row, his eyes shining with pride. Afterward, he hugged her, whispering, "You're my hero, Mom." Eleanor laughed, brushing away tears. "And you're mine." As summer arrived, the library hosted its first anniversary celebration. The neighborhood gathered, music filling the air, children chasing balloons. Michael unveiled a new addition, a small garden outside, with a bench dedicated to Eleanor. "For the stories we'll share," he said, and she hugged him, her heart full. Eleanor looked out at the crowd, at the life they'd built from pain. She thought of the wedding, the letter that had tried to erase her, and the strength she'd found to fight back. She'd lost much in her 70 years, but she'd gained more wisdom, love, a son who knew her worth. The library wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of what they'd overcome, a promise that no lie could break their bond. As the sun set, Eleanor and Michael sat on the garden bench, the world quiet around them. "I'm proud of you," she said, her voice soft. Michael smiled, his hand finding hers. "I'm proud of us." They sat there, mother and son, their story unfinished but stronger than ever, rooted in love that no betrayal could shake.